try one more time.
I think we do it this way. And so welcome everybody, all the students and you in Brussels. We will now have a day with hot topics on food policy from Brussels. And I will go through very briefly the agenda and how to interact, strategic instruments, a little bit about that, and this course. And about this course, it's, you know much about this course, you students, but this is also for the ones that are not joining the course. So to put it in a perspective. Yeah, so I will now say a few words, this opening, and then Massimo, the head of NTNU Brussels office, Massimo Busuoli, you have already seen him on the screen there. He will introduce EU and its institutions. You have heard a little bit about it before from the Norwegian delegation, but now we also get it from our Brussels office. And after a break, we will meet Rada, Chehlarova from DG SANTE, that will talk about the farm to fork strategy and related implementation, and then a break. But after she has finished the presentation, you can ask questions. And then after the break, it's Hélène Dage from DG Grow that will talk about code of conduct. And then we have a break, a lunch break. And the lunch break will be about 1 hour before we have the rest of the agenda with animal welfare, reducing food losses and waste, and health and diet. So this is day 1, and we will finish around 4 o'clock. So we have time in the end of each of this presentation to ask a question. And tomorrow we start at 8:15. And we'll continue the day till 14:30. But I will talk more about tomorrow morning. So about the concept of this course, we have chosen relevant topics for you that are affecting the food actors in Norway. And every year we go through what is the most important that has happened, and what is important for you to know about and learn about. And then we suggest and invite relevant guest lecturers. And my colleague Massimo here in the Brussels office is inviting and suggesting different people, different experts, different decision makers in the EU Commission, in the EFSA, and in other parts of EU that are very relevant to these topics. And then we design the agenda, and you students prepare questions on each of these topics. And for you to know in Brussels, the students has made 5 questions for each of the lectures, and they will ask some of them during today and tomorrow. And this is also to interact and be prepared. And now we have the digital classrooms with presentations and dialogue, where the students will ask the questions. Later on, you will reflect on the different topics and have some work requirements in the course, and then meeting the regional food actors on these relevant topics, and discuss with the food actors on their challenges when you have new experience and new knowledge about the food policy. And then a semester work together with a food actor on relevant topics, where you evaluate hurdles and possibilities using innovation methodology, policy knowledge, and food science in the industry on these relevant challenges. We'll look at them as well. Yeah. So the topics last year is the same as this year in the workshop. So it's sustainability labeling, animal welfare, food packaging, nutritional health, food losses and waste, and research and innovation. So these are the topics. Maybe we change a little bit, but when you meet the food actors in Rørvik in a few weeks, this will be the main topics. And very briefly, what are the different parts that or are deciding what the future of policy will be? It's the UN Sustainability Development Goals that are all linked to food, and 4 of them are not so easily to meet from the OECD countries. And some of these we have also chosen to use in these digital classrooms. And today we'll learn about the farm to fork strategy. It's action plans there that will affect in a few years the food actors. So here are some examples: new food supply chains, legislation on the nutrition, environmental and social aspects of food, and animal welfare. We have the new circular economy action plan. And also we learned about the biodiversity strategy last week. So it's also, food is also important in this one as well. So we have different possibilities to influence the food policies. And you have heard a little bit about it before, but we are involved in different forums, like the European Food Forum, that is different food actors, policymakers, universities and knowledge institutes, many working together to find solutions for the best and knowledge for the best policy in the future. And also like instruments such as the GPI, a healthy diet for a healthy life, where different countries go together and put their research money into areas that they cannot solve alone. And recently, NTNU also became a member of Europe's largest innovation initiative on food systems, the EIT Food, which is also a possibility to affect the future food systems, and to also the research funding, and to have networks for affecting what will happen in the future on the food area. So, yeah, food system you know about. Then I will just show you briefly the food losses and waste that you will hear about later on. Yeah, you cannot see it here, but the food losses is the part from the natural resources to the distribution and retail, but the food waste is from retail, distribution, and to the consumer. So that's important to know the difference. Maybe you already know it, but it's interesting to know later today. So this was what I wanted to say in the beginning. And I want you to enjoy the day. We have made a tailor-made program for you. And I have read your questions, and I think you have made very good questions. You had a time limit to deliver them yesterday, so it was not so much time to go through it. But be active today, and if you find the questions not relevant, ask what you want to know about, because I know that this will be very relevant for your future jobs, and also for the rest of the course, of course. And then I will stop sharing. And do you have any questions now? No. And you can also ask questions on the chat. But then I will stop sharing. And I will give the word to Massimo, that has done a great job together with his colleague in Brussels to make this program. So Massimo Busuoli, I'm very glad that you're always joining this course every year. I think it's the fourth year now.
I think, or
fourth year. Yeah. So appreciate it a lot, and you will learn about Europe, the different institutions from Massimo. So then I give the word to you, Massimo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eva, for this kind introduction and for your words of appreciation for the work we are doing together. And for me, just to send also a reciprocal message, is a pleasure to collaborate with you. And as we are doing since several years, I think that it's really constructive also for the Brussels office to be so engaged and challenged by our professors in NTNU. So I appreciate the way we are working and collaborating a lot. So good morning, everybody. I am Massimo Busuoli. I am the head of the Brussels office of NTNU, an office which has been opened in 2016, following the guidelines of the government, of the Norwegian government, asking the research system to try to be more present and more proactive in getting funding from Europe and collaborating with Europe as well. Just a bit of background about myself. I'm clearly Norwegian, as you can hear from my name and my accent. But jokes apart, I am Italian, and previously, before joining NTNU, I was working in the second research body of Italy, and as well in more or less the same role that I have today in NTNU as director of the liaison office of the second research body of Italy, which is called ENEA, becoming also the unit for the management of European affairs. In my presentation to you, I wanted to provide you a bit of flavor of the dynamics and the actors that are somehow designing the policies at European level. So to give you a bit of understanding on how the machine works to arrive to the definition of the laws and guidelines and strategies that, of course, the Fund to Fork is part of. So let's have just a look about what is Europe and how it works, at least in this field. So I don't know, you see my screen?
Yes, we don't see the presentation yet, but we see your screen.
Okay, good. So you see the presentation, and as I like also dynamic exchange, feel free to interact with me in case you have direct questions or needs for clarification. So do not refrain to just enter in my presentation and ask for clarification, so to make it as dynamic exchange. So let's have a look to the European Union. So who is Europe? Which is something that I discovered that is not totally understood by everyone. Sometimes I also have Europeans which do not know who is Europe. European, I mean member state representative, because of course Norway is part of Europe, even if it is not at the moment a member state. So who is Europe? And of course, next one, we can link it to the mythological person. Yeah.
We cannot see the presentation. We see your screen, but not the presentation.
Okay, let's see. Because you are screen sharing, media, probably you have to screen, not to share the screen, but you have to share the presentation. Yeah, exactly. Share. Now, Eva?
Yes.
Yes, now we see
it.
Okay,
so we put it in presentation mode. You still see it?
Not yet.
Probably because you need.
Not yet.
That's strange because we are sharing the screen. That's funny.
We could see the presentation, but it wasn't in presentation mode.
Okay, so this means that media, probably you have to select the duplicate video option in the yeah, duplicates. We are in duplicate. That's funny. I don't understand why it doesn't work. When we switch to presentation mode, go again to presentation mode now.
Not yet. Now something's happening, I think.
Okay.
But now we see it with your notes. So maybe go on display settings.
Now you see the presentation in presentation mode?
Yeah, but go on the display settings and make it so you only see your notes.
You see it, Eva, now?
Yeah, but put on display settings. Display settings.
Yeah, media is working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, on the top there, you have the show taskbar and you have the display settings.
In the top bar of Zoom, Eva?
Sorry?
It is in the top bar of Zoom.
Yeah, it's in the way we see it is on the top. It's show taskbar first and then display settings and end slideshow. So if you go on display settings, but maybe you don't see it in your screen. No, on the top. Yeah, okay.
Because you are seeing the screen. That's funny because here I see my presentation and you're seeing the screen of media. Advanced sharing option, maybe. No, you should share my presentation and this is fine. What I do not understand is why it doesn't go to when you put it in presentation mode, you don't see it. Yeah. So, Eva, the display settings are in the PowerPoint or are in the Zoom?
Now we can see it in the PowerPoint. Not
because you are seeing us, but when we pass in the presentation mode in the slideshow, I don't know why it goes out.
Okay, yeah, but you can put it on. It's okay to have it as you had it, but we see the
PowerPoint. So let's try to make the PowerPoint and we'll try to solve the issue afterwards and not to have you losing too much time. So basically we can of course link Europe to the mythological figure that is part of the mythology, or next one. Yeah. Understand what Europe is today, and Europe is a set of initiatives, if you want, that on a variable geometry are going to collect the various actors. So here you see the variable geometry of Europe, which foresees, of course, in the central side of it, the European Union, so the member states with the Eurozone, and from which at the moment Norway is out. This is an old picture. Now UK is also out of it, even if you still notice the flag of UK in the middle center. And then you have some specific agreements that allow other member states to interact with Europe on the basis of specific collaboration themes. You know about the single market, where Norway is very active, but also other areas that are being defined where Norway is participating, like the European Research Area, like the European Higher Education Area, like the European Space Agency, and other single initiatives that are somehow written in the various treaties that regulate the way member states are involved, the countries, the European countries are involved in the overall dynamics of the European system. Can you go next one? Yeah, so basically Europe is a collection of treaties with corresponding supranational, international, intergovernmental and or interministerial bodies, competencies and decision-making procedures. All the treaties that are established with the member states somehow regulate who is going to lead a specific field and how the decision-making processes are regulated. And basically the institutions have to identify their collective interest and they have to address them through the correct procedure to the right body. The bodies of Europe are responsible for the decision-making processes that are in any case made collegial in agreement with the various countries that are part of the decision-making process. Next one. So what does Europe do, the European Union do? Next one. The European Union is considered to be a supranational intergovernmental organization which have, in some cases, exclusive competencies, like, for example, the competition and the internal market. These are exclusive competencies of the European Union that somehow decides on the regulations and define how the member states should behave in this framework. But the European Union has also shared competences. For example, in the research field, there is a sort of shared methodology of work. In Europe, there is a decision on European strategies for research, but also at the level of member states, every member state do its own national strategies. And there are complementary competencies where somehow, in this case, they, you know, that, for example, in the education area, Europe has no influence on the way member states define their way to educate the local young people. As the same applies for culture. So somehow, as you can understand, the European Union is a world that works on different levels according to the level of influence and responsibilities that is agreed with the members of the European Union. Next one. And what does the European Union do? Basically, it defines the legal instruments by proposing directives, by proposing regulations, by proposing decisions or co-decisions. When Europe issue a directive, means that the member states have to follow it. And if they do not follow, they are somehow fined. They have to pay fines to the rest of the system. But Europe also proposes regulations that have to be adopted by the member state and accepted by the member states, and propose the decisions, again, that have to be adopted and accepted by member states. In all cases, if it is a directive, if it is a regulation, if it is a decision, there is always a decision process taking it to be adopted and accepted by the member states. Europe is also the place where the use of money is defined, the use of European money. For example, in the past, it was Horizon 2020, the framework program for research and innovation. Today is Horizon Europe, where, for example, the European Commission proposes how to spend and how to invest the 80 billion euros that were part of the budget defined for the previous framework program for research and innovation, and coordinates the decision on how to invest them. And Europe is not only Horizon Europe, the European budget, which is called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, is a budget of 1,022 billion euros, on which the European countries have to decide how to invest them. And the European Union is proposing how to valorize and mobilize the money that everyone is putting in the pot, including Norway, under different conditions, because of the fact that Norway is not a member state as of now. And of course, the European Union, through the European Commission, does also communication, action plans, and define and design policy instruments that somehow drive the common strategies that the countries are following, like, for example, the Farm to Fork initiative or strategy. Next one. Who are the bodies of the Union? There is a set of entities that somehow are part of the decision-making process that normally happens in a sort of in a dynamic that is called trialogue. The trialogue is the process on which every decision is taken. Even the Farm to Fork strategy has been somehow ratified through this trialogue process. How the trialogue works? The European Commission proposes the policy of the legislation. This is normally done through the so-called Directorate General, so the executive bodies that the European Commission has under the responsibility of the various commissioners. And after the proposal, the European Parliament and the Council, which are the two lines of the decision making in the process somehow decide on it by proposing amendments or changes to the proposed policy and legislation package that the Commission is thinking and taking to the decision-making bodies. As you can understand, there are two parallel flows in the decision-making process of Europe. The European Parliament is one of them, and the Council of the EU is another one. And this is why it is called trialogue. It's a trialogue decision-making between the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council. The Council, for the one who doesn't know it, is basically the decisional body collecting the ministers of the member states according to the various areas of interest. So sometimes she's the Minister of Research, sometimes she's the Minister of Industry, according to the dossier that is discussed and the theme that is to be decided. And there is also a fourth leg in this game, which is still European Commission, that have no decisional power in the decision-making process, which are the agencies. So basically, the agencies of the Commission, after the policies are defined, are the body which are mandated to execute the programs, run the calls, invest the money, launch the initiative, involve the players, make all the actions that are necessary to mobilize the set of European actors to achieve the political targets that are defined by the European Commission and ratified by the Parliament and the Council. Next one. Basically, the European Union works like a normal country government. If we wanted to have an abstract image of Europe, Europe is, if you want, a country in itself, with the member states being the regions of it. This is why the European Union is composed by a set of commissioners that can be somehow compared to the concept of ministers in a country, managed by a president. You see, this is the composition of the current European Commission, the set of commissioners that are in place until 2024, because the Commission changes every 5 years, and normally is composed by one representative per member state, managing a portfolio. So, for example, for NTNU, the interesting portfolio are the energy one, where you see there is an Estonian responsible for it, the internal market one, which is basically industry, and this is a French guy there, the research and education, where you have a Bulgarian, which is Maria Gabriel, and also, of course, transport, as well as democracy and demography, because of gender balance, gender issues, and so on, and the digital one, where we have a Danish commissioner. Next one. Just to tell you how it works, because of course Europe has also to define a strategy on which the policies are done. We started, I would like to go back a bit in the years, because the Lisbon strategy represented an important moment for Europe in defining also the way to manage the research areas. So in 2020, just a bit of history, next one. Why we need a European strategy? So basically, the member states meet and define the strategy for the years to come, decide the approach, decide the way we are going to invest our country, our money, to guarantee that the challenges which are common to the member states are well managed. You know perfectly that today we have a system of very interlinked economies and the common currency, which is the Eurozone. And somehow we have to face the competition with bigger entities like the United States, or like the Indian country, or like the Chinese, if you want, partly also the Japanese, which are very strong, even if it's small. And somehow with the vision, for the reason to create a European system with member states sharing common goals and strategies, is because no member state can succeed alone. If you compare Germany to the United States, you immediately notice that Germany is really a peanut compared to the dimension and the critical mass that the United States has. And on the other side, the European strategy helps to define the division of labor between the EU level, where the member states are collaborating all together to achieve the targets, and the member state level, where still local strategies and the country interests are managed through the investment of national funds. So the partnership is at the heart of the so-called Lisbon strategy that represents a sort of milestone in the definition of common European strategy. Next one. The Lisbon strategy, which was defined several years ago, basically in March 2000, where the member states met to do a council, and they defined this strategy to be adopted for a 10-year period, so a long-term strategy. The original aim of the strategy was to fill a vision for Europe, making it the most dynamic and competitive knowledge-based economy by 2010. So the vision in 2000 was to fix Europe as a knowledge-based economy. So investing in knowledge, investing in education, investing in the capability to develop innovation. Next one. The basic were, of course, economic, social, and environmental, and was based on the economic concepts of innovation, learning economy, and social and environmental renewal. You are probably still recognizing these as the basics for the current period, because we are still talking about innovation, we are still talking about the need to educate people to generate and nurture the innovation. We are still talking a lot about the social inclusion and the involvement of citizens. And the strategy was aimed to create a stronger economy in order to generate employment in the European Union through all the policies that were somehow defined jointly. Next one. The problem was that member states in Europe are still learning on how to collaborate together. Situation is improving and improving, but Europe, if you want, is a very young country, if you want to define it like this. So after a midterm review, their results were not very encouraging. And then this, somehow next one, called the system to try to find a correction to the strategy, because there were too many priorities. There were no hierarchy, of the priorities defined. And somehow the priorities were changing from one year to the next. There were too many targets and there were an unclear governance. So this is why in next one, this is why in 2005, the member states defined a renewed strategy based on less targets, but of impactful importance. Basically, the priority were growth and jobs. The cycle was not anymore 10 years, but was reduced to a 3-year with only 2 targets, taking the spending on research and development to the 3% and trying to achieve a 70% of employment rate. With the new governments trying to create a partnership and responsibilizing a bit more the member states on delivery. Next one. And in 2006, in the European Council, the strategy has been also designed in the definition of 4 priority areas. And again, you see more research and development, business, innovation, if you want, equipping people to adapt to change, including investing in people means education, so another important role for university, and an integrated EU energy policy. In 2006, Europe started putting order, for example, in the whole sector of the energy research and innovation, because this has been the year in which the path toward the adoption and the creation of the Europe based on renewable energy started. Next one. And in 2007, also thanks to a favorable macroeconomic conditions, this choice started to show impact for Europe with improved capability to collaborate and creating better regulations with good signals from the economy. Next one. In any case, as I told you, the member states work at a different speed. And you see who was somehow very fast in adopting the approach to the Lisbon strategy. And you notice that Nordic countries were very fast in being aligned with the strategies, while you see the even France and Germany was a bit slow in coming to the speed needed to achieve the reform foreseen from the common strategy. Next one. If you're interested, these are some links that you can have a look to the Lisbon strategy, which also arrived to a version 3.0 post 2010, so when the strategy needed to be renewed. Next one. And in 2010, you probably remember, if not, I'm telling you that we got a big economic crisis with high unemployment level, with a high level of youth unemployment, a decrease of the industrial production, and a decrease in the GDP growth. Next one. And there were three scenarios at the time leading Europe to 2020. I mean, how we could have recovered the crisis and in which political way. And these were the three scenarios. So having a possibility to go back to a sustainable recovery, so recovering the lost positions in the years, or a sluggish recovery, so basically blocking the decrease but remaining on a level, or going to a lost decade, so continuing to making the crisis worse. Next one. And this is why there was a new strategy in place in 2010 called Europe 2020, trying to take Europe back on track, and at the same time, again, trying to define a long-term vision. Next one. Again, the European strategy in that period was still based on the same values of the Lisbon strategy, the high economic interdependence between the European countries, the political momentum that was a bit critical, and the consideration again that only the European Union, the member states, can give a critical mass to have impact and allow us to activate all the political areas and levers in an integrated way, in order also to create an effective exchange of best practice and help each other to recover from the crisis. Next one. The new Europe 2020 strategy was based on the lesson learned from the Lisbon strategy. And next one. It was based on 3 thematic priorities, 5 targets, translated also into national ones, to make sure that Europe was capable to achieve the targets by having the member states working in that direction, 7 flagship initiatives of EU based on EU and national actions, and through the mobilization of existing EU instruments. So improvement of the single market, which you know is very important for the economy of the country, because it allows, for example, the free movement of goods without taxes, border taxes that are creating extra expenses and so on. Working a lot on the external dimension, so trying to achieve collaboration and alliances with the extra EU countries, US, China, etc. Creating a stability and growth pact, somehow imposing a limit of expenses to the various member states to avoid the economy to get worse, and also work a lot on cohesion policies and other financing instruments to somehow leverage money from the European system and redistribute it to the national systems to allow even the lower performing and more in crisis countries to recover. Next one. The 3 linked priorities that I mentioned were smart growth. Again, you see the concept of an economy based on knowledge and innovation was still in place. Creating a sustainable growth, which is the path that we are still following, so greener and more competitive economy, a green Europe, and creating inclusive growth. So trying again to work on the concept of providing work for everyone. Next one. Then the 3 priorities have been also identified in the targets that the country should have reached to help Europe. And you see the employment rate was even increased as a vision, taking it to 75%. The 3% investment in R&D was still considered to be something needed to be achieved. And the greener Europe, by basically defining the 2020 climate energy targets, the 2020 were improvement of the 20% of renewable energy use in Europe, reduction of 20% of the CO2 emission. And so everything was based on the willingness of Europe to go into a direction more greener, especially on the climate and energy area. Improvement of the scholarization, so they wanted to reduce early school leavers, and they wanted to decrease the people at risk of poverty by 20 million. Next one. The 7 flagship initiative were somehow also defining the 7 flagship initiatives, which were the policies to be adopted to achieve the targets. And these were the basically 7 policies that the Commission defined in 2020, in 2010, to arrive to 2020, so to arrive to today. And basically they define an innovation union for the research and innovation. They defined the education part, how to improve. They defined the willingness to go for a digital society, so pushing a lot on digitalization, which revealed to be very useful according to also the fast digitalization ramp up that we had due to the COVID crisis. They worked in the sustainable growth to push Europe to become resource efficiency by investing in renewables, by reducing the environmental footprint, by even going for a better sustainable mobility, including electrification of it. Defining a strong industrial policy and working on the inclusive growth, defining 2 main strategies for the employment skills and the fighting of the poverty. I gave you the titles in case you would like to find this document and read them. So this is just an initial flavor for them. Next one. So in 2020, we basically arrived with this approach. Which kind of approach we have today? Which kind of strategies? Which kind of policies? So next one. You see, this is the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. She's German, and she's currently driving the Commission to deliver on the vision. And the vision was that Europe must lead the transition to a healthy planet and a new digital world. At the moment, Europe is basically the first country, how can I say, it's not a country, but is the first continent that is heavily investing in the green shift. Putting the system, if you want, a bit under pressure, because a lot of investments are requested and a lot of effort from the company is requested to fulfill the need to achieve the green shift. Next one. And to do this, the European Commission has somehow defined the 6 ambitions, which is the Green Deal, that basically is the one driving the research and innovation system to deliver on striving to be the first climate neutral continent, but also another important strategy is the one related to Europe Fit for the Digital Age. So grasping the opportunities from the digital age within safe and ethical boundaries. Europe now, if you want, also in the digital sector, is really keen to make sure that important technologies like artificial intelligence are developed and implemented, taking into account ethical principles. Because, of course, now that we are entering a digital world, we have the risk of manipulation of people and misleading use of technologies. And Europe is also putting a lot of attention on the ethical use and development of this kind of technologies. Working on social fairness and prosperity is basically ensuring employment and good working conditions for the people. Promoting the European way of life is a way for Europe to defend our democratic value and avoiding that our culture and our democracy are put in danger by different vision and approaches. A stronger Europe in the world wants Europe to lead the world policy. This is why, for example, the choice to be the first continent driving the green shift has been made, to start a process on which the others are expected to follow. So we try to be in the forefront to qualify Europe as a strong entity in the decision process that are happening worldwide. So trying to find an equilibrium between us, US, China, and other big players. And a new push for European democracy is the one that is working for protecting the democracy, avoiding fake news, or if you want, influence from other countries in our processes. Next one, just some last slide to help you to understand the context where the farm to fork strategy is part of. This is called the European Green Deal. Is the basically, as I told you, the vision that should take Europe to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. The Green Deal is composed by several pillars. Some of them are related to the environment. And here you have the farm to fork strategy that is in focus for you. Some of them are related to the climate, the financing part, because everything that is implemented as a policy needs financing to be then realized. And some is related to the economy, so the impact on the economy. And you see here, for example, the circular economy approach that basically asks even the productive system to adopt different production methodologies to guarantee that the resources that we are using are not wasted anymore, but are somehow part of a virtual circle where they are reused or used for other purposes, but not just wasted. Next one. So the Green Deal is a set of policies. The vision is to mainstream and design the policies, but also, and this is very important, leaving no one behind. Why I'm saying this? Because Europe is still in a situation in which we have very strong players, and Norway is among them, even if it is not a member state, with a lot of excellence in knowledge, a lot of capability in generating innovation and so on. But we have, for example, the Eastern countries, which are still lagging behind in their capability to be at the same level of knowledge and innovation. And so the Green Deal is conceived to make Europe to grow, but also to help the ones which are at the moment lagging behind to recover and to grow together with the others, so to create a Europe which is capable to deliver at the same speed and capability. Next one. These are the areas where the European Commission has developed strategies. You see the farm to fork strategy, but also we have sustainable and smart mobility. We have biodiversity that you have seen in this day. You have the ambition to come for a zero pollution, toxic-free environment, meaning all that is beyond the CO2, no? The industries that pollute the air with chemicals and so on. So try to drive regulation also to reduce pollution at all levels, not only in the reduction for CO2 emissions. The building and renovation in an energy and resource efficient way to again decrease the energy request and make the choice to go for sustainable energy and the renewable energy sustainable because we are reducing the consumption. Mobilizing industry for circular economy, as I told you, the clean, affordable and secure energy choice to take Europe to be more and more detached from the petrol, and increase the EU climate ambition for 2030, and more importantly, 2050, where the target is to go for a climate-free Europe. Next one. I'm not going to take this too much. These are the various actions that are part of the policies. Next one. For every policy, you have a slide that give you the target that the Commission have in mind to achieve the objective of each of them. Next one. Next one. This is industry. This is the one sustainable. This is the farm to fork strategy. Next one. Biodiversity. Next one. zero pollution ambition for the toxic-free. Next one. Research and innovation importance. So basically, the way the money is going to be invested, and you notice that the Commission is committing to invest at least 35% of the total budget for research and innovation for climate solution, and also doing a lot of work in the field of Green Deal related to making action impacting to achieve the Green Europe. Next one. And in the past, there has been launched a Green Deal call for 1 billion euro to start changing the mentality of the actor and go in specific direction. Do not forget, as Eva already said, that the Sustainable Development Goals are one of the baseline on which the Green Deal is also interconnected. And so basically, the Commission needs also the system to start moving and working in this direction of more greening view. Next one, and this is my last slide. I wanted just to spend a few words about the main environment where NTNU is engaged, which is Horizon Europe. Probably you have heard about it. Europe is known to have the largest in the world in terms of funding research and innovation program. Horizon Europe is the new program for the next 7 years. You see that it's composed by different pillars. Every pillar corresponds to a level of maturity of the technology that you are going to develop in your project. If you're going to work in the research sector, innovation sector, even in the industrial sector, you could probably have the need in the future to know about these opportunities, because basically these are excellent opportunities even for a company to develop innovation, reducing the risk of the investment because the money comes from Europe. And is also a program that can help a company to have access to the unlimited knowledge that is present in all member states. So somehow you are exiting from a local system of knowledge, being capable to benefit from the knowledge of partners from every country to develop your innovation, and so to create an impact from for your company, and in such a case, if it is a Norwegian company, for your country. Horizon Europe is structured in pillar. Pillar 1 is for excellent science, meaning basic research developments. Pillar 2 is the pillar where you create collaborative projects composed by different players all over Europe to design and define development up to the level of prototypes. And the pillar 3 is the place where the companies can take the prototypes and implement them in their industrial processes. All these pillars have money behind it. Horizon Europe accounts for a total of 80 billion euros of funding that is available for companies through a specific set of calls for proposal. The horizontal pillar that you see here is the pillar where the European Commission is trying to create funding and opportunities for the Eastern countries to be more engaged in the various actions that are happening at European level. Next one. So thank you for your attention. I hope I was not too boring or too complex. Feel free to ask questions, and I hope that this panoramic view helped you to understand some of the dynamics in place.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Thank you. It's a very good overview, I think, and also history behind the strategy. I think that was very interesting. So I think I changed the way you're asking questions, I think, because it's easier since most of you are here. And then if someone have one question for Massimo, you can ask it now before the break maybe, and if you have more questions then you can write them in the chat, and I think it's possible to answer them later on. Is that right, Massimo? Yes.
No problem. No problem.
Yes. Do anyone have one question? No. But you can think about it, because they have not made pre-questions for you, Massimo.
I know, and I know that I gave a lot of information in a short time, so that's
this is a lot of information, and you have
I have a
slides.
question.
Yeah, you have a question.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I saw something in the beginning of the presentation that the employment rate was meant to be increased to 70% back in 2005.
Yeah.
What was the employment rate before that, and what is it today?
That's a good question, because it goes back in history, but for sure it was lower than 70%. I think it was around 60 at the time, 60, 65. I don't have the clear number. Maybe I can try to sort it out. But basically, you see, we have a high unemployment rate. I think that even today, the young generation unemployment rate is very high in the framework of the unemployment rate of a country. I know, for example, that in Italy, the unemployment rate is still around 20–25%. And in this 25%, more than 40% are young people, which makes the situation very worrying. I mean, if you want. So there is, of course, a need to work in this direction to make sure that there are good opportunities for all, especially for the young generations, which represent, of course, the future for every country and Europe in general. So this is why Europe is very keen to work to solve this issue as much as possible. Even, of course, if there is an endemic baseline of unemployment rate which cannot be solved, that's for sure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Massimo. And then we take a break till 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yes.
Meanwhile, we try to understand how to share the slides and make the presentation visible.
Yeah, we can do a little testing. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
More impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think some of my colleagues are coming, no?
Yeah. Some have decided to enjoy the Italian coffee, so that's
Very good.
they decided to take the Italian flavor in the Norwegian office. Now, what is happening? So. I think she found a way to see herself on the screen.
Yeah. This is all set now.
Yeah, because it's a local setting that you need to do. Yeah. So basically, we are just waiting for the students. So Eva, I wait for your okay to start.
Massimo, I think you also had a question. If you would like to answer, it was on the chat box, but if you don't have it.
Okay. Then we are ready from Trondheim, Norway here, and look forward to the presentation. So Massimo.
Okay, so very short introduction to our first guest in this digital classroom. We have the pleasure to have with us, and I would like to thank her for her kind availability to be with us today, Rada Chehlarova, which is EC DG SANTE team leader for Farm to Fork and the Farm to Fork strategy unit. So the best to start with the person which is definitely relevant for the topic that you are going to look at today. Just for you to know, SANTE is the Directorate General for Health and Food Safety. So the Directorate General, which is more one of the Directorate General of the Commission, which is more in focus in the definition and implementation of the Farm to Fork. So without losing too much time, Rada, thank you again for your presence, and the floor is yours. And we are going to support you with the exchange of slides from here. So just say
very much, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this digital classroom on food policy. I'm very happy to be here with you today. And as explained, I work in DG SANTE, more precisely in the unit that is in charge of the Farm to Fork strategy, be it its coordination, but also more generally in charge of some of the main deliverables of the Farm to Fork strategy. I will give you further indication about this later on in my presentation. So today, what I would like to touch upon in my presentation is first on the concept of sustainability, especially when it comes to food systems. And then I will elaborate a bit on some of the challenges that the current food systems are facing before moving on to what exactly the Farm to Fork strategy is about and how we have gone about its implementation. Because As you will see, we have started a lot of preparatory work already on many of the initiatives, and I would like to give you a few highlights on this. It is to be noted that some of the points and the topics that I will present will be further developed later on during the day by my colleagues, who will provide you with additional details and let's say more context about some of the initiatives, be it, for instance, on the code of conduct that you will hear just after me, or on food waste or animal welfare. So I would like to start by indicating that the Farm to Fork strategy that was adopted by the Commission on 20 May 2020 is an integral part of the European Green Deal. It is true that the climate and environmental ambitions of the European Green Deal cannot be reached without making our food system sustainable. And this is precisely the goal of the Farm to Fork strategy. But what exactly do we mean by sustainable food systems? Usually, when we talk about sustainability, people tend to believe it's only one aspect that we're covering, the environmental part. But for us, and also for FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, one of the UN bodies, and this is one of the definitions that we have based ourselves upon, a sustainable food system should be sustainable in all three dimensions that you see here, meaning the economic, the environmental, and the social health one. When we talk about economic sustainability, what do we mean? Well, this includes aspects such as guaranteeing jobs, fair incomes, a fair share of the added value for all economic operators in the food systems. When we talk about the social health dimension, we do believe that this also includes, as I said, health, meaning healthier diets, but also better animal welfare, and importantly, to ensure a just transition for those most concerned by the transition to sustainable food systems. And finally, the more obvious dimension of sustainability, the one that I mentioned at the beginning, is the environmental one. This means that a sustainable food system is one which is in harmony with its environment, which includes obviously lower GHG emissions, but also, let's say, the fight against food loss and waste, and a soil that is healthy and that continues to provide us with the necessary food and necessary and nutritious food. Next slide, please. This leads us to the challenges to some of the challenges that the EU food system is currently facing. From many points of view, the EU food system is currently not sustainable. So if we look at the social sustainability, for instance, with regard to human health, the major challenge, as I said earlier, is to make our diets healthier and sustainable. And indeed, we have noticed that there are certain issues that we need to address. For instance, we must address the growing number of citizens who suffer from hunger and malnutrition. There are currently around 33 million EU citizens who cannot afford a quality meal every second day. There's also some issues to address when it comes to consumption patterns. And currently, we know that in Europe, over half of the adult population is either overweight, and some are even suffering from obesity. And all this obviously leads to some diet-related diseases, be it cardiovascular diseases or some forms of cancer. And we estimate that in Europe currently, 1 out of 5 people are dying because of these diet-related diseases. So as you see, there are a number of challenges here that needs to be addressed, and that are, as I mentioned earlier on, part of this social health sustainability that the sustainable food systems need to tackle. When it comes to environmental sustainability, well, we need to tackle climate change by reducing the GHG emissions. And this also means to reduce the GHG emissions from the food sectors. In the EU, currently, agriculture is responsible for 10.3% of the greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of which are related to the livestock sector. We also need to protect the environment and enhance biodiversity and reduce pollution. I also would like to mention that this is part of not only of the goals that a sustainable food system need to achieve, but also I will go back to this a bit later on, but the day we adopted the Farm to Fork strategy, we also adopted the biodiversity strategy, showing that the importance of bringing nature back into our lives. So there is also this important dimension of reducing food loss and waste that has actually so many dimensions, an environmental one, but also a social one, because it was, there are some paradoxes in the fact that today about 20% of food produced in the EU is wasted. And on the other hand, you have people who have no food or who suffer from malnutrition. So these are some of the environmental challenges that our food system need to tackle. And finally, I would like to come now to some of the economic challenges that we are facing from a sustainability point of view when it comes to the EU food systems. We see that farmers, fishers, and aquaculture producers, meaning all the primary producers, need fairer and better incomes. Currently, their incomes are lagging behind other sectors. We also need to attract young people to farm. This is also part of the strategies that the Commission is adopting, thinking of how to make sure that there is a renewal of farmers in the EU. And we need to protect our environment and natural resources to ensure the future of food production. We also need to create new business and job opportunities, green ones, which will obviously enable us to enhance our competitiveness. And addressing these challenges in an integrated way, involving all stages of the food value chain, but also going beyond by involving actors such as researchers, innovators, and investors, will lead to sustainable food systems. Next slide, please. Given this background information that I just gave you, not only on what we mean by a sustainable food systems with all these three dimensions that I mentioned, but also on the challenges faced by our current food system, it will be no surprise to you to learn that the Farm to Fork strategies mentioned 4 general goals. These are to reduce the environmental and climate footprint of the EU food system, to strengthen its resilience, to ensure food security in the face of climate change and biodiversity loss, and to lead a global transition towards competitive sustainability from farm to fork, and this while doing this and tapping into new opportunities. But more concretely, next slide, please. This means that when we talk about having a neutral or positive impact of food production, what we mean is basically preserving and restoring the land and sea-based resources, mitigating climate change and adapt to its impact, reverse the loss of biodiversity. When we talk about ensuring food security and public health, what we mean is also making sure that we ensure access for everyone to sufficient, nutritious, sustainable food, and maintaining high standards of safety and quality, plant health, animal health, and welfare. Because the EU is the EU standards when it comes to quality of and safety of plant health, animal health, and welfare are some of the highest in the world. And finally, when we talk about preserving the affordability of food, this is obviously the economic dimension that we are referring here. And what we mean is generating fair economic returns and fostering the competitiveness sector, promoting fair trade, safeguarding occupational health and safety, and ensuring the integrity of the single market. The last part of this slide, meaning the one that is in this square, is extremely important because all this should be done while never compromising food security and food safety. These are cornerstones of our food systems, and we do believe that actually the concept of sustainability embeds the concept of food security and food safety. A food system cannot be sustainable if it doesn't ensure this food security and food safety. Next slide, please. So maybe some of you have heard some of the controversies around the 4 targets included in the Farm to Fork strategy, because these are some quantitative objectives that have been put forward in the strategy and that need to be achieved by 2030 by the EU. So these 4 targets are the following. The first one is to reduce by 50% the overall use and risk of chemical pesticides and reduce the use by 50% of the more hazardous pesticides. The second one is to reduce nutrient losses by at least 50% while ensuring no deterioration in soil fertility. This we expect will reduce the use of fertilizer by at least 20%. The third target relates to antimicrobials, and the objective is to reduce the sales of these antimicrobials for farmed animals and in aquaculture by 50%. And finally, the last objective, quantitative target, is to achieve at least 25% of the EU's agricultural land under organic farming and a significant increase in organic aquaculture. So what I would like to mention about these targets is that, first of all, they are not legally binding, but they will obviously play a role in guiding our EU policies and also in implementing the strategy. They will also play an extremely important role in the context of the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, and especially the National Strategic Plans, where member states will have to consider the objectives and targets of the Farm to Fork strategy when they draft their national strategic plans. In addition, it should be stressed that these in addition to all these quantified and quantitative targets, there are also many other objectives in the Farm to Fork strategy for which no quantitative targets have been set. But they remain important objectives as well. And these include the promotion of healthy and sustainable food consumption, the improvement of animal welfare, or the promotion of sustainable packaging solutions. Next slide, please. In order for the transition to sustainable food systems to be successful, we believe that an integrated approach is needed. This is actually one of the novelties of the Farm to Fork strategy. As you can see from this slide, we are going away and beyond the linear food supply chain actors. I mean, the linear food supply chain actors are obviously, you start with the primary producers, you go to the food manufacturers and processors, and at the end of the day, I am simplifying here, you have consumers. Well, we do believe that in order to achieve a successful transition to sustainable food system, we need action from a wider range of actors. These include obviously the ones that I just mentioned, meaning the food supply chain actors, but also input from actors such as those from the area of research and innovation, because we need new technologies, new innovations, new tools to be discovered in order to be used and to achieve these objectives of a sustainable food system. But we also need input from the financial sector, because obviously we need money to support and to invest in those technologies. And then we also need input from the advisory service, but also the knowledge providers, because all this needs to be translated and also explained to the ground so that people could finally and eventually use this, let's say, new discoveries or explain new ways of producing or of manufacturing food. And then, very importantly as well, there is a need of action from all public authorities at all governance levels, be it at the local level, but also regional, national, European, or international. And all these actions, actually, in order to achieve a sustainable food system, can take various forms. Obviously, we mentioned here legislation and regulations, because and you will see from my further on in my presentation that there are various legislative initiatives that are on their way in order to launch this transition. But there is obviously a need to have financial incentives, education, research and innovation, and also voluntary commitments are playing an extremely important role in achieving a sustainable food system. So this is also, as I said, reflected in the action plan of the strategy. I mean, this mix of legislative and non-legislative measures, and the action plan of the strategy actually contains 27 initial actions of both legislative and non-legislative nature to start the transition to sustainable food systems. There are also many other actions that are that are not listed in the action plan, but are part of the implementation of the strategy. I will just mention a few. So for instance, when it comes to research and innovation, in the proposed Horizon Europe program, which is the research program of under the new MFF, the multi-financial framework, we have 9 billion euros that will be dedicated to research in the area of food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, fisheries, aquaculture, and environment. Also, as I said, it's not just a European action. I mean, we cannot achieve a successful transition to sustainable food systems by having the EU act alone. So on the international dimension, actually a lot is going on as well. And the Farm to Fork strategy aims to promote a global transition to sustainable food systems in a partnerships approach and in line with the objectives of the strategy and the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are mobilizing all the instruments that we have at our disposal in order to promote this global transition. And this means not only trade, but also international cooperation, and also taking action in some of the multilateral fora. For instance, I don't know whether you're aware, but in next week already, there will be the United Nations Food Systems Summit. And obviously, this is an important forum where we are all participating, and the EU is one of the main actors of this summit, showcasing everything that we are doing in order to launch and to achieve this transition to sustainable food systems. Next slide, please. So I would like now to give you a bit of information on some of the initiatives that have been already launched to implement the strategy. Because as I said, the strategy was adopted on the 20th of May in 2020, and it's been now more than a year that we have been working on its implementation. So preparatory work has started on a lot of initiatives, if not all, and some have even already been completed. Next slide, please. I would like to start with one of the horizontal action of the strategy and one of its flagship initiatives, and this is actually the legislative framework on sustainable food systems. The objective of this initiative will be to accelerate and facilitate the transition to sustainable food systems. It will contain a comprehensive set of definitions, general principles, and requirements on the sustainability of food systems. And it will be the basis to ensure policy coherence at EU and national level, mainstreaming sustainability in all food-related policies. It will also have as an objective to strengthen the resilience of food systems. So just a few words of further background on this initiative. It is something that for the moment does not exist. I mean, at the moment in EU legislation, we have a framework legislation on called the General Food Law, which is on food safety, and it actually has a set of definitions and general principles and requirements when it comes to food safety. But a comprehensive and horizontal legislation on sustainability of food system does not exist at the moment in the EU legal framework. Next slide, please. And this is actually one of the initiatives on which the unit in which I am working is leading. We are starting preparatory work on this initiative, and basically the first steps that are already foreseen for 2021, although the proposal itself will only be adopted by the end of 2023, are the following. There has been for some months now, since January last year, a group of experts discussing on the areas of relevance and the different approaches and concepts that around sustainability of food systems. And these different experts have as a task to come up with a set of possible options for a comprehensive policy intervention on food sustainability. So the report of this expert group will be published in November, and I invite you all to have a look as soon as it is published, because it will indeed contain a lot of ideas and really potential options for the EU to develop such a legislative framework. Then, as is customary in EU decision making, the Commission will publish an inception impact assessment for feedback. And again, so this marks the first step of the legislative process, because in this inception impact assessment, we will present the objectives of the initiative. We will also explain what are some of the likely impacts of such an initiative, be it in the area of environment, of health, or on the economic side. And then we'll also outline some of the options that we are considering to study in the impact assessment. So this is a document that is not so long. Usually it's between 4 and 10 pages, but it is published on our Better Regulation portal, and everyone, including you, can give its feedback and indicate whether you believe there are elements in the analysis that are missing, or what you think of what is presented to you. And then following this inception impact assessment, we will launch the actual impact assessment, which will analyze the different options that we will consider, and we'll analyze their impacts in terms of health, environment, economics, but also human rights. And at the end of the day, this will all be presented in a report that will show the different, let's say, impacts of the different options considered. And it is based on this impact assessment that a decision on which option will be chosen and which legislation will be put forward by the Commission. Then, as you know, it will be for Council and Parliament to discuss and agree in the context of the legislative ordinary procedure. So for the moment, these are the next steps for 2021. And I really invite you to have a look, because this is a legislation that will have that will mark a paradigm shift in EU legislation, and the views of everyone are more than welcome. Thank you. Next slide, please. Another horizontal initiative that was foreseen in the Farm to Fork Strategy Action Plan is the Contingency Plan. So this emerged obviously from what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. It must be stressed that indeed the strategy was finalized while we were in the first months of the crisis. And the idea was that we need a plan to ensure food supply and food security during crisis. So this will be a document that will be published by the end of this year, a communication, and that will set out a common EU food crisis response mechanism. This is a forum where there would be representatives of member states and possibly stakeholders, and the Commission will be coordinating. And basically the idea would be to exchange information and make sure that in case a crisis occurs, everyone is communicating, everyone is ensuring the flow of food products, and there are no hurdles, and we try to eliminate all the obstacles that could emerge. So it will contain an agreed set of procedures to follow to respond to crisis, and it will take the form of guidelines and recommendations and non-binding agreements with member states. So this is, as I said, something that you will see finalized by the end of this year. And obviously this forum that will be created in the next, in the upcoming months. Next slide, please. I would like to come now to some of the other initiatives of the Farm to Fork strategy. And you will see that with the examples that I chose, I mean, first of all, you will see that they cover all stages of the food production, be it primary production or also, let's say, the middle of the chain actors, but also consumers. And you will see that there are actions and initiatives that take different forms. So you have obviously the Common Agriculture Policy. This is one of the main financial instruments to support farmers in the transition, but you will also see regulations and other legal proposals, but you will as well see, I will briefly mention before my colleague further develops on this, the Code of Conduct, which is one of the first deliverables of the Farm to Fork strategy and which is a voluntary initiative. Next slide, please. But first of all, the Common Agriculture Policy. I think there is a bit of information missing on the slide, but that's fine. The Common Agriculture Policy plays a big role in supporting farmers in the transition to sustainable food systems. The 2023-2027 CAP negotiations were finalized this summer between Parliament and Council. And some novelties of the new CAP and that were contained in the Commission proposal back in 2018 include better targeting of CAP support, higher green ambitions, and improving the response of EU agriculture to societal demands on food and health. Another novelty is the focus on subsidiarity. So CAP national strategic plans are being prepared by member states to meet the 9 objectives of the CAP, and the deadline for submission to the Commission is December 2021. Member states are invited in these national strategic plans to define a national target to be achieved in 2030 as a contribution to the achievement of the Green Deal and especially the Farm to Fork and biodiversity targets, those that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. Next slide, please. Here they are. I think the next, I didn't know there was an effect on my slide, sorry, apologies for that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Another initiative on which we are working is the revision on the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive. So the evaluation of the legislation and the impact assessment have been carried out back to back, meaning that there was no time in between and some of the procedures have even been put together. So this initiative will be driven by the following objectives. First of all, reduce the use and risk of pesticides containing more hazardous substances, then increase the uptake of less hazardous and non-chemical alternatives for pest control, improve the implementation and application of the current Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive, and the adoption of this initiative is already foreseen for the beginning of next year. And as you know, this will be then discussed by Council and Parliament, and especially we can expect obviously some debates among co-legislators, especially on the first bullet point that I mentioned, because this is also related to the quantitative target that has been set in the farm to fork strategy itself. Next slide, please. In the area, exactly. In the area of animal welfare, there is currently an evaluation of the legislation that is ongoing. And the planned revision of the legislation for 2023 to align it with the latest scientific evidence, to broaden its scope, make it easier to enforce, and ultimately ensure a higher level of animal welfare. Next slide, please. It also includes actually the option to check whether or not we will put in place an animal welfare labeling to better transmit value through the food chain, meaning that farmers who are respecting high standards of animal welfare, or higher than obviously those that are set in the legislation, might be given the opportunity with such a label, in case it is concretized, to transmit this information up to the consumer. Next slide, please. So the animal welfare legislation is at the moment, as I said, under review. Basically, there is a fitness check that is ongoing. This means that this is what we call in the Commission an evaluation of whether the legislation is fit for purpose, whether it is still effective, efficient, meets the objectives. And then this fitness check is carried out in 2021, 2022, and the revision of the legislation will take place in 2023. But I know that you will have more information on the animal welfare issues later on today by my colleague, Mr. Gavinelli. So I will stop here with this. Next slide, please. Then one of these non-legislative initiatives that I mentioned. So over the last months, and especially since January last year until the entry into force in July, the Commission has worked intensively on an EU code of conduct on responsible food business and marketing practices. So what are the objectives of this voluntary initiatives? First of all, it is to engage stakeholders downstream in the food supply chain with sustainable production and marketing practices and responsible business conduct. The idea here is that this was mainly targeted at the middle of the chain actors, and it was, and it is still, and still is, an initiative whereby these middle of the chain actors commit to tangibly improve the environmental and social performance of their activities, and building on existing good practices and on front-runner examples. So this, after intense discussions that were taking place over a period of 5 months, next slide, please. The code entered into force in July and was actually, and still is, composed of two parts. The first one is a general part of the code, and it contains a set of 7 objectives, each with its targets and indicative actions. These relate, for instance, to actions that promote the shift towards healthy and sustainable consumption patterns. The objective is here to improve the impact of food processing, retail, and food services operations on sustainability, and to improve the sustainability of the food value chains. So this is mainly a level of commitment and a general part that is aimed at EU associations, and they should report on the progress that they have made on this general part and on these aspirational objectives on a yearly basis. There is then a second part, which is aimed and targeting more precisely companies. And it is actually a framework for front runners for ambitious commitments with measurable outcomes, covering a wide range of areas from animal welfare to sugar reduction and cutting greenhouse gas emissions in their full product range. Here as well, we foresee that companies will report progress by submitting a summary of their sustainability report on an annual basis. Who can sign the code? Next slide, please. Well, as I said, European associations, meaning associations, also associations willing to make concrete contributions. Example of this are those that have will put in place sectorial guidelines or will carry out studies that will help in this area, or associations that put forward ambitious commitments on behalf of their members. There are also, as I said, especially for the second component, individual companies with concrete ambitious commitments who can sign the code. And finally, there are other stakeholders, those that we call the collaborative supporters, that can contribute with expertise, share best practices, and ensure coherence with other sustainability initiatives. To date, we have over 80 signatories of the code, and they represent both EU associations and companies, but we also have companies from outside of the EU signing the code. And actually, all their commitments are available on our website, and you can have a look to see what exactly they have put forward as ambitious goals that they want to achieve. Next slide, please. I will now slowly come to an end of my presentation by showing you, first of all, what we do in the area of consumers. These are actually initiatives that are talking to a lot of people because they see it in their supermarkets, and this is something that they actually see in their daily lives. So on food labeling, we have foreseen in the strategy, and it is a commitment that the Commission will adopt by the end of 2022 a proposal for harmonized mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling, a proposal for the setting of nutrient profiles, and a proposal that touches upon the extension of mandatory origin and provenance indication to certain products. And finally, rules on date marking. This later initiative is also linked to the area of food waste, for which we have also committed to set legally binding targets by 2023. So this is, as I said, the initial steps on these initiatives have already been taken, and last year already we published the Inception Impact Assessment, and we are currently at the stage of launching the study for the impact assessment itself. And there will soon be a public consultation, especially to discuss the various aspects of these proposals. And again, this is the public consultation that is open to everyone. So I invite you to also have a look and provide feedback if you feel like you want to contribute. Next slide, please. And finally, in the area of food waste, as I said, the date marking proposal that I mentioned earlier when it came to labeling is very closely linked also to food waste. So there is already a proposal that is foreseen in this aspect, but also the Commission has committed in the Farm to Fork strategy to come up with legally binding targets for the reduction of food waste across the EU by 2023. So this is something that is also work on this has also very much advanced. And again, here we will publish an Inception Impact Assessment in the course of 2021, where you can also provide feedback on the different policy options that are envisaged for this legal measure that is to come in 2023. Next slide, please. And with all this, I would like to conclude and say that basically with this presentation, I tried to show you what the Farm to Fork strategy was about, to stress more importantly its integrated approach, the fact that we believe that this transition to sustainable food system can only happen and be successful if we are all part of it. All meaning all the actors that I mentioned, all the initiatives that I mentioned, but also us as consumers. So, so as it says here, the farm to fork strategy, it's down to us, and I definitely encourage you to take active part in all the initiatives that I mentioned, to provide feedback, to give us your ideas, because it's only together that we will manage to improve the situation and also to contribute and to achieve this climate neutrality that we all want for our continent by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a clear and informative presentation. And this is very relevant for the students. And they have already read the Farm to Fork strategy. And I think they have some questions for you. So who want to ask questions? Yeah, raise your voice.
Okay, so I'm wondering, in your opinion, what target will be the hardest to achieve in the Farm to Fork strategy and why?
Well, if you ask member states, all of them are difficult to achieve. It is obviously something that these targets have been put forward by the Commission, following an analysis of the latest trends, following an analysis of all the data that we have at our disposals in these different areas. Be it, as I said, pesticides, antimicrobials, organic, or in the area of fertilizers. So we do believe that these are ambitious targets, but we also believe that they are feasible. And we think, and this is why we are trying to encourage member states to put forward ambitious actions in order to achieve them, because we really do believe that they are achievable. But if you ask member states, they would tell you that they are all difficult to achieve. They wouldn't be able to choose one. So.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, you first.
How does the Farm to Fork strategy ensure that food does not become more expensive? So organic sustainable food does not become so expensive that only rich can afford to buy it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear at all the question. There were cuts. Would you mind either maybe speaking up, or if someone in the room has?
Is it echo from the conductors? Can you mute?
I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it your computer that you need to mute? Yeah, okay. No, it's good.
Can I write down the question in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Now I hear an echo as well.
Yeah, I think that she has to come near to the main microphone of the room, Eva. Otherwise, you're creating an audio loop. So I don't know, Eva, which microphone you're using to speak.
Yeah, I think we need to use the one in the room only. Yeah, but now it's better. Yeah, you have written down the question. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So the question that you raise is an extremely important one. Obviously, this is, so you're asking basically, how do we ensure that sustainable food does not become more expensive? This is part of all the actions that we are trying to, as I said, a sustainable food system is one that is sustainable on all angles. The environmental, the social, and the economic one. And the economic one means there are two aspects. On the one hand, ensuring fair incomes to the producers, to all the economic actors, but also ensuring that consumers have access to affordable food and affordable sustainable food. So there are various actions. On the one hand, there are the financial instruments that are at our disposal in order to help the economic actors in the transition. So I mentioned the CAP, and in the area of agriculture, this is an extremely important and one of the main financial instruments that we have to help farmers in the transition so that they can produce sustainable food and do in such a way that their production costs do not increase tremendously. So this also helps then in the final price for the consumer. But then we also believe that as soon as sustainable food and sustainable food production becomes mainstream, you will have economies of scale, but also this will enable to generate and to produce food sustainably, but also not necessarily having an increased production cost. Therefore, ensuring that this is not then trickled down to the consumer. So these are some of the main lines of thinking. But obviously, this will not happen in tomorrow. There are adjustments that will need to be done, and this is something that is extremely important, and that that everyone is aware of, that we need to pay very close attention to.
Thank you.
In which ways, if any, have the COVID-19 pandemic affected food security in Europe?
Well, thank you for the question. So as I said, we did finalize the farm to fork strategy while we were in the first months of the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously, we have all noticed, and maybe you as well, that there were cases of empty shelves in the supermarkets because we all went frenetically to the supermarket to make stocks and things like this. But overall, what we noticed was that there was no problem of food security as such. Meaning that food was available, it reached the consumer, and the fact that we did sometimes face empty shelves in supermarkets was very, very quickly addressed. But as I said, we also foresaw in the farm to fork strategy the adoption of a contingency plan to be able to react to better cope with future food crisis. And this was the document that I indicated would be available by the end of this year. This is in the form of a communication, and where we will set up this forum in order for member states to exchange and be able to anticipate potential obstacles in case, and potential problems in case you have these issues coming up again.
Do you have a few minutes more? I know that in the agenda it's 50.
Yes, I think I have 5 minutes more. If,
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Other questions?
If not, I have a question.
Yes.
This isn't one of the questions we have written down, but I'm a little bit curious about, I mean, their meat production, especially red meat and also pork and poultry, is generally associated with a higher environmental load. And I'm wondering for the future, does the farm to fork strategy include ways moving forward? Is there any initiative in decreasing it politically, the consumption, or how does one address that in a sustainable farming context?
So thank you for the question. Indeed, I mean the consumption of meat and whether or not there is a setting of a target to achieve in terms of reduction of consumption of red meat is definitely an issue that is raised very often in the context of the farm to fork strategy. What I can tell you is the following. In the Farm to Fork strategy, we do acknowledge that, moving towards a more plant-based diet with less red and processed meat will have not only health benefits, but also environmental ones, as you just mentioned. So this is a clear statement from our side. Then there is, as you have noticed, no target to achieve, but indeed, this is definitely part of the efforts that we are conducting in a lot of initiatives, basically. You know? So for instance, when you talk about, let's say, what we will do with our framework legislation on sustainable food systems, obviously there, as the main objective is to accelerate the transition to sustainable food systems, and as healthy diets is one aspect of this, I mean, this will be one of the objectives that we will pursue. If we talk about, let's say, other initiatives such as the Code of Conduct, you also have there reformulation commitments to put forward that industry and food manufacturers, processors, put forward food that is, for instance, less high in fat, sugar, salt. And we know that some of this processed meat is actually very high in those nutrients. So, so as you see, I mean, this is not an issue that we tackle from one initiative. It's actually transpiring through all the initiatives that we have put forward in the Farm to Fork strategy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
There was one question.
Ja, jeg tenkte jeg skulle gi andre en sjanse også, men ja. Okay, do you want to read the question? You don't need to do anything here, just
yeah. I know that Rada have a meeting at 11 sharp, so maybe we can, if there are other questions that are written in the chat, maybe we can ask her to maybe answer in writing, Rada, if this is not for you a problem, so to allow you to go to the next meeting comfortably.
Sorry, I am hearing you.
Yeah, I'm saying that I know that you have to rush because you have a meeting at 11. So as there are a couple of questions that are in the chat, what if we copy and paste them in an email to you?
Sure.
In writing, is this a problem for you?
No, not at all. Of course, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, because I know that you are very pressed, and of course we don't want you.
No, I'll be happy to answer in writing. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you, and I wish you an interesting and full of questions day, because I see that you have shown a lot of interest on this topic, and it's very good that you are. And I really encourage you to provide us with your feedback on our proposals, because we need also the voices of young people, and not just those that are always following all our initiatives and that know where to answer and when and how and exactly. So thanks a lot again for your interest, and I wish you a very nice day and a fruitful day.
Very good. Thank you very much. And we will search to find where to give feedback and distribute among us. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye. Okay.
Yeah.
So while we are waiting Hélène Dage to be with us, she said that she's coming to our premises, but I noticed that she was also connected while Rada was speaking. I don't know if Hélène is still with us. In any case, now we have a long break. As you notice, we need to reshuffle the agenda, so we are meeting again at 11:30.
Yes.
Good.
See you 11:30.
11:30. Ciao.
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 Also want to do there is to actually make very much share the best practices. So this code of conduct is about also transparency of the measures that the different industrial players are going to put in place. So there's the possibility for industry to actually sign up to the rule code and then to engage into the implementation of a number of the proposed actions. They do not necessarily have to do all of them at the same time. We know very well that it will be quite impossible actually from an economic and industrial point of view. But there's also this second part, second component, where front runners can present yes, more ambitious commitments. And we think that this component is very important because it shows that, yes, what the front runners achieve. And but when you show by example that something can be achievable and that actually it's not detrimental to the competitiveness of the company, we think it is very important. Because let's be realistic, any business first and foremost wants also to remain and has to remain competitive if it wants to thrive and to survive. So this aspect of actually, yes, pushing industry transition through sharing best practices is very important. Rada also explained to you, yes, about the product reformulation, yes, trying to have less salt, less sugar, and globally to make products more healthy for the consumers. Also, the serving sizes, which should also be aimed at, yes, having a sustainable food consumption, but also an impact on waste. And so generally promote the consumer awareness. Then also it's important to have, yes, responsible also standards in terms of food marketing and advertising practices. And so there we strongly, the industry is strongly invited to adhere to self and co-regulatory initiatives and standards. And also it starts also, of course, in the workplace, in schools. We know that a number of member states have put in place policies in schools to actually there make sure that there is also healthy food choice and which leads also to creating healthy habits for the consumption in the future of the citizens. So that's also something which is important. The second aspirational objective is about the prevention and reduction of food loss and waste. We want to reduce, there's already been an extensive number of policies in the last decade to reduce food waste. Objective is to reduce it even more and to reduce it so along the food production and supply chain. So from the transformation, but also at the level of the retail and at the level of the consumers. So we know that retail also there in many member states has been making considerable efforts as policies in place to, for example, systematically discount products when they are reaching their the consumption date limit. There's also the food banks, because unfortunately also know with we know very well that many people have difficulties to actually there's a poverty, this strong poverty issue in some and it's so food banks have a role to play. So on the retail side already lots has been done and best practices can also be exchanged, but it also starts at household level. And there we propose a number of actions. So you see, it's not necessarily for industry, but clearly also we can do something in terms of raising awareness of consumers, and also digital tools can probably help them for that. So on the waste aspect and the different actions, you will have a presentation later, so I will not go into the details. The third aspiration objective is to have a climate neutral food chain in Europe by 2050. So we want to reduce the net emissions from all the operations. And so that's quite, yes, yes, ambitious objective. In an industry where we know very well that there is a significant energy consumption for food transformation and also for food conservation. There, we see that there's a significant potential of actually using more systematically renewable energy for heating and cooling in the agri-food industry. And this is something which we very strongly encourage. On that particular front, on the use of energy, but also more in general resource efficiency, I'd like to highlight that actually this is also something which is not necessarily not only for the potential for the agri-food industry, but for many other sectors. And there's a strong possibilities there of actually making investments which are improving at the end of the day the profits of industry. So for that purpose, we have developed now for some years the European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, which is wants to help SMEs to identify the best technologies for them with a view to improving their resource efficiency while actually getting more competitive. So this is hosted on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. And it's presenting different technological options. A large number of those technological options are actually ready for the agri-food industry. And what's very important is that actually it is showing case studies. So there we wanted that the technologies are not just presented from a pure technological, what is like the state of the art, but demonstrated technologies with the implementation and where it is really the showcase that this is the cost efficiency also of this technology, so that companies know on what they are embarking when they are doing those investments, and to demonstrate to them that it's actually in their best interest to do it to improve their resource efficiency. And we will continue to develop this database because we want to actually help industry the agri-food industry to find even more better options. We should also, it's true that also the EU is very strong. Europe in general, I mean also the whole of Europe is very strong in actually in green technologies. We see that because this cluster collaboration platform, so where we have clusters from all the different sectors, ecosystems in the economy. We have about 1,500 cluster organizations, which are representing a large part of the industrial landscape in Europe. And there we have actually 400 green tech clusters. So we are very strong in green technologies and green technology developments. And so we also think that there's a high potential in actually, connecting better the green technology providers with industry itself. And so we will also mobilize this European Cluster Collaboration Platform to help the agri-food industry to get in contact with the green tech providers. But generally, yes, increasing this use of renewable energy sources is something which is very important. We know also that in the agri-food domain, many industrial players use waste as biomass, for example, already, but we really encourage to implement everything which is economically feasible. The fourth aspirational objective is secularity and the resource efficient food chain in Europe, so in general. So also there, within there is this aspect which is water efficiency, reduce food waste, and so it's just referring to what I already explained. But there is also the sustainability of food and drink packaging, and that is a very complex issue. Which is because we know that food and drink packaging has also to abide to safety standards. So it's something which is essential, but we also realize that the quantity of packaging which is generated by food and drink distribution is, for the time being, it is not something which is sustainable. We cannot imagine continuing like that for, let's say, 300 years. So it's important to increase the recyclability of food packaging as quickly as possible and to the largest extent possible. So there is sometimes the issue, or often, that yes, recyclable food packaging might be more expensive, but there also we think that it's a question to a certain extent of economies of scale also, and if a larger part of industry moves towards a more recyclable and packaging, then also the price might clearly improve. It's but the one important thing which I would like to highlight is that when we discuss with industry for the drafting of the code of conduct, we also discussed the developments and the implementation of reusable and refillable solutions. So this is something which was probably far more used some decades ago for drinks, for example, which is still very much used for some specific value chains like beer. There is the example of beer distribution where you have quite a lot of consigned and reused bottles for water, also for some soft drinks. And there, the industry itself sees the necessity and we have, especially we had UNESTA, who was also present in the discussions, to go into this direction. But this is clearly something which cannot be implemented at an individual company level. There you need to have an organization of the distribution, of the resending the reusable containers. So you need to have a value chain organization, probably some standardization, and this is also something which can be which is debated, because yes, some for example, some in Germany, for example, the beer bottles have standardized, and so any producer will use the same ones, more or less. In some countries, they prefer to have, they consider it's part of the visual identity of the brand to have a bottle which has this or that shape. There's also the responsibility for the quality of the bottle itself, and so it's a complex issue, but clearly this has to be addressed by value chain, and this is something which we really need to push very much in the near future, and we see industry willingness, and so there we encourage strongly industry to collaborate together for that purpose. The fifth aspirational objective is about the sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. We should not forget that also, the agri-food industry provides very important employment across Europe. And so we know that also the agri-food industry is also a very strong contributor to our exports, and we are a net exporter. And that in general, it's contributing, so not only to feeding people, but also to providing them a livelihood. So that's something which is also essential. And we want in general to have quality jobs for everybody. So on that front, we also know that there are many industrial players have been highlighting that sometimes but it's irregular, depends from one region to the other. But they might have a shortage of workers in very specific professions. That's one thing. So we think that there we need also to make efforts on the skills. We are working currently also with industry to develop the pact for skills with the agri-food industry, with a view to enabling collaboration. between the industry and the skill education providers in general. So schools, technical institutions, all sorts of skills providers. So that is something on which we are working. But there also an important element is the digitalization, since the digitalization is now something which is needed at all stages of industry, from actually the machinery, yes, being able to actually operate the machinery, which is doing the food transformation, to managing the stocks, to especially then also managing the sales. So this digitalization aspect is also something which is very important. There we have a different number of instruments. We have also the digital innovation hubs, which we want to have one in every region to help industry to digitalize. The sixth objective is this sustainable value creation through partnerships. So there, what we want is also to put the emphasis on the supply chain relations. I mentioned already the example of the reusable containers for food. If you want to implement that, clearly you need to have this supply chain collaboration, because the retailers have a major part to play. So that's one easy, simple example. But in general, we see that there's a lot of technologies which have the potential of being transferred and used by other industrial players. So we see also that for smaller SMEs which are producing, it can be interesting also to collaborate with bigger players, or the retailer could help them to actually identify the best technologies. And so this technology and knowledge transfer is something which is very important. But there we're also talking about yes, engaging in joint pre-competitive research and innovation. And there I would like to mention also the important role that yes, the agricultural schools and universities and have to play, and that students who typically are very innovative and open-minded have an important role to play there in proposing, yes, innovative solutions. For example, and we had a nice project some time ago on that, on using what is not used in the food transformation, and what might be left on the side and typically used for biomass, for example, to actually use those and develop new products, or to that's one thing, but also for this reformulation. And I think that's something which is really essential, is that you as yes, future actors also in this industry and in this ecosystem, do not hesitate and really to bring all the innovative ideas that you have, and really we would like to encourage strongly industry to try to yes, find ways to be in contact with innovative people to implement that. Stimulating sustainable production. There is yes, the aquaculture is a specific example where we know that and fishery practices. We know that there is quite important to yes, implement the best possible yes, solutions with aquaculture. But for example, we know that it has also an impact in general also on the fish stocks, and improving animal welfare in general. But there again, you will have a presentation later. The sustainable management of natural resources, that's something which is also not in the direct scope of this code, but where also there's a question of also the industry makes a choice of purchasing from one source, and it can also help and encourage and support also the primary producer to make a more sustainable management. And yes, about the use of pesticides and fertilizers, I think also Rada also already mentioned that. Also, sustainable sourcing in food supply chains is something which is important. So there I go beyond this primary production, because many components are actually also imported. Thinking about cocoa, for example, or palm oil, or there's many different commodities which we import. Also soya for animal feed, which we massively import from the Americas. And so they're also in those at this level, it's important to make that industry also makes choices and also identifies clearly where it is actually purchasing. And so this promotion of sustainable sourcing of materials is something which is very important with a view to reducing deforestation, to protecting natural habitats and biodiversity. We have to be aware that what we use has an impact, a strong impact in those countries producing those commodities. Also, the social performance of global food supply chains is something which is important. Now, I already explained to you, yes, this aspect that we have this European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, which is providing, yes, a database of different technological options, but also showcasing their performance from an economic point of view. We have the European Cluster Coalition platform, where we have already about 100 agri-food clusters registered. So those, we will also mobilize them to actually showcase their best practices on the European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, and also to potentially also collaborate together to reach out to the green tech providers, because the European Cluster Coalition platform is enabling all of that. And there also we will make also a communication effort towards all the different organizations across Europe, which might be supporting already actually the agri-food industry to register on the European Cluster Coalition platform as a cluster, with a view to facilitating their collaboration. Finally, the Enterprise Europe Network will have from January 2022 onwards sustainability advisors in all its members. And so we will mobilize those sustainability advisors to actually support the agri-food industry to do this transition. For that purpose, we will develop also again on this European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center small self-assessment test, which would be basically a presentation of the different actions of the code of conduct with the corresponding best practices, so that industry can actually look on different actions, what is the state of the art and what can be done. And so with this little questionnaire, which will enable them to also identify priorities, so where they have more potential to actually improve their situation. And yes, that's the tools that we have. So already, I think it has already increased. There's more than 76 signatories so far. But so that's the different associations. So to show you the names of the different associations which have signed, voila. The companies, over the time being, it started with big groups, big companies, which very often have already policies in place. But where we see really the big challenge now is to get more SMEs involved. And that's why we insist very much on this role of intermediary support organizations. Voilà. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Thank you. Then we applaud again because because I was wasn't sure if you heard. Thank you very much. This is one of the first deliveries from on the farm to fork, is it? All right. This is very.
Yes, this is one of the first deliveries of the farm to fork strategy. The code of conduct was proposed in the farm to fork strategy, and so that's what we have put in place. The farm to fork strategy also states that there will be some monitoring of this code of conduct. We will try to do that by analyzing also the best practices, by analyzing in a globalized way the results of the little self-assessment tool, which we will put at the disposal of companies. Our objective there at this stage is really to identify what is potentially more challenging for companies and where they need support, to identify best practices with a view to really sharing them more widely and potentially, identifying them as potential standards for industry. And so we look at it from a very constructive point of view, and also as an opportunity, yes, for industry to really become an example for the rule of the world. We think that the sustainability dimension can also be a strong competitive advantage for European industry, because the sustainability dimension is increasingly seen as something which is important for consumers, not only in Europe, but also in the rest of the world.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a very good overview and a little bit complex area, but so thank you very much. And I think the students have some questions.
Can I also be a student, Eva?
Yes, you can also be a student, Massimo.
Because I have a question, if I may intervene, even if I know that I am out of scope in this case because the focus is on the students. But thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And I was wondering, you say that the code of conduct is open for signatories. And I'm wondering if a university like NTNU is focused on delivering knowledge, possibility for technology transfer, transferring technologies, can also be a signatory here to become a facilitator in making this happening. This is one thing that I was thinking to ask you. And the second point is, of course, you are setting up aspirational objectives that the company are committing to deliver. But are you planning also to link the existence of the code of conduct to some specific goals of Horizon Europe, for example, so that maybe a partner can mention that the project they are delivering is also in line with the aspirational objective of the code of conduct, so somehow linking the investments that Europe put at disposal with the possibility to valorize the commitments that the signatories are taking in the code of conduct. Do you see this kind of somehow dynamics to happen?
Yes. So on your first question on the universities, I think it would be something quite interesting. I'm not sure. I have to get back to you that it has been foreseen yet, because we had considered it was more umbrella organizations. But I think that you have a quite important role to play, exactly, and all the technology providers, indeed. I will get back to you on that. And I think that's something which we need to discuss in the implementation. Also, because, yes, I think that the universities and technology providers have a major role to play in the clusters. So when you have some kind of organization of agri-food industry in a cluster, or even if it's not called yet the cluster, but we think that it's very important that there is this collaboration at regional level between all the innovation, all the innovation players. That's really fundamental and essential. And so, and there we also see that in general, I mean, the clusters, not only in the agri-food industry, but in general, which thrive better, are the ones where there is better interaction with the universities, where's the technology centers, etc. But this is something which we have to actually push for in general to have more innovation, and especially in this case. So, I mean, we will think, thank you for your suggestion, we will think about it. On your second question, Sorry, can you repeat your second question? Because now I'm a
The
bit.
second question is, at the moment you are asking the signatories to take commitment, no? To
Yes.
meet the aspirational objectives, but sometimes having some money on the pot helps to reach.
Yes, on the horizon. Yes,
objectives, yeah. So I'm
On the
wondering how
horizon,
you
yes.
link it with the existing funding
Yeah.
instruments, you know, like Horizon, for example.
Yes, like horizon. Yes, absolutely. So this is something where we are now at the beginning of the new financial perspectives, and this is something which we definitely want to do, is to have at least some, yes, to a certain extent, some not alignment, but to see where the research programs can actually help develop or implement technologies for those purposes. And so that's why also we think it's interesting for us to have what I explained, this monitoring, because if we realize that it's more challenging for some specific aspects, maybe we should probably help more to develop some technologies there. So there we really need to have this overall vision, and definitely, yes, to mobilize the different research programs and also other instruments to help this sustainability and healthy transition of the agri-food industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can take a question. So I wonder surrounding the objective of a healthy and sustainable diet for all European consumers, and the report that has analyzed how to achieve a healthy and sustainable diet for all is the Eat Lancet report from 2019. So I was wondering if you know of that report and if you support its conclusions regarding how we need to change our food consumption.
I've not read personally this report. No, but on this, as I explained, I mean, we have this code of conduct has been actually developed in the context of the overall farm to fork strategy, and clearly this healthiness of food for consumers was something which on the Commission side we insisted very much. So I understand that maybe, because I'm not familiar with this report, but maybe some, let's say, healthy food experts might consider that maybe this code of conduct is not going far enough. But this is a document which is meant for the whole of industry to be able to actually abide to it, and also to help all the consumers, even the ones who are not paying like very high attention to healthiness of the food, to improve. So we're not aiming there at achieving like the super highest best standards, but at having a transition which is feasible for everybody while maintaining also the competitiveness of the industry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you talked about the need for stimulating sustainable production and to promote and support innovation. So my question is, how does the current legislation framework in the EU support the implementation of innovative tools that could help the agro-food sector turn towards a more sustainable path?
Well, as I think that Rada explained to you before and presented to you, so I would invite you to go back to this presentation. And she explained that we are currently also in the process of revising certain aspects of the food legislation. And that this is based very much also on impact assessments. And so we are currently in the process of a number of impact assessments for that purpose, and measuring exactly what is the situation. So this is an exercise which is very much ongoing on many legislative aspects. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then Karianne, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you say something about, like, in general, why is there a need of a code of conduct in the food sector?
Yes. So why is there a need? I think, as I will go back to the signatories, and I will show you that all those companies have been following and supporting the development of the code, and they had already put in place some policies before to do that. So all those companies, each has a bit experimented. So that's the front runners. They have experimented, they have done one or the other thing. But I realize that, of course, none of them has been actually putting in place policies across all the different aspects of what I have mentioned. So I think that's the first reason. It's important that there is an exchange of best practices and that they're demonstrating what can be done on different aspects. And so that also the big front runners, the big companies, they can actually do, more across the different elements of the sustainability of what they are doing. That's the first reason. The second reason is that, and I think that's, for me, that's very, very important, is that it's mostly, as you see, it's big companies, and it's companies which have a certain scale, which have certain resources, which have been able to actually test those new solutions, implement them, and demonstrate their effectiveness. For an SME, typically it will be much more challenging because the SME doesn't have the same human resources, doesn't have the same financial resources, cannot do a little, let's say, test on a very specific subpart of its business. If you have a retailer, let's say you have a retailer with 100 shops, he could, for example, test a new solution or new something in 3 of them and see what's happening. When you are one SME, if you make a test, you're testing the real business model. So that's really challenging. So that's why we think it's very important that SMEs realize that that is where the EU is going, and that they can see in which domains they can do something, and that they can see what are the major players already doing, and so implement the best practices in question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have time for one more question?
Yes.
Yes, I have a question, and that is about the Agro Food, because it's in the most of the objective you talk about. I think nearly all of them, except the last 2, it's Agro Food, and the last 2 are mentioning the aquaculture and fisheries as well. So I wonder, is aquaculture and fisheries also a part of all the other objectives in the dialogue?
That's part of agri-food, yes, definitely. I mean, fish and aquaculture are part of food production. So this is clearly part of it, absolutely.
Yes, and then thank you. Then I want to mention that the students are meeting a lot of SMEs in this course, and also learning about the clusters. And many of the food companies are engaged in these clusters, regional and national clusters. So I think this is very interesting point of view as well, to see how to engage in this.
Okay, no, very important, and I really strongly encourage all the clusters to register on the cluster collaboration platform, and to use it. We're going to have a page there. We have already a page on for the agri-food, and if they want to collaborate with other clusters, or if they're looking for partners, they can use it, and to actually find partners.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we have got good answers to all our questions. And I think maybe you have already answered some questions in your presentations, because I see that the students' questions they have more questions, but so you had a very good presentation covering it all. So thank you very much here from Trondheim, Norway.
Okay, thank you very much. And so I wish you a nice continuation of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Then we have.
Yeah, I think we will give a break right now. And I think we will meet at 12:15. I'm not sure. No, 1:15.
Yeah, 1:15. So now we have a lunch break.
So I think Andrea is the next speaker. Yeah, No, Andrea Gavinelli will come, but he will join from Zoom. And then we will have the next few here in the office.
Okay, yes. So Andrea, he will join on Zoom, and Anne-Lover on.
Yeah, and Paolo, they will be here in the office.
Yeah, good. Okay, good job from Brussels.
Thank you.
Okay.